Sunday lunch is always hell. Hell slathered in my mother's roast beef sauce and carefully seasoned with saccharine praise for my sister. That day was March 15th, 2024. I remember it, 3:47 p.m. I stared at the phone's dial as if it could save me, yank me out of here like a life preserver. My instinct screamed, "Run!" I should have listened. Our entire menagerie, all 23 of us, were crammed into my parents' dining room in Westchester. The air was thick as jelly, with the smell of overcooked meat and gossip. With laughter that sounded false even in my own ears, I sat at the far end, in the shadows, trying to disappear into the floral wallpaper, my usual post. And Sarah sat at my father's right hand, like a queen on a throne. Her hand darted around, catching the light from the massive chandelier with a 3-carat diamond, a gift from her precious Marcus. Marcus Thornton, whose father, a senator, my father seemed ready to place on the altar instead of a religious icon. Sarah is marrying into one of the most influential families in the state, his voice thundered, drowning out all other sounds. For the 100th time. I thought my eardrums would burst. Senator Thornton himself will be at the wedding. Just think about it. Mom beamed like that diamond. We are immensely proud of you, honey. And Sarah only lowered her eyelashes sweetly, twirling her ring. Marcus and his family are simply wonderful people. I plunged my knife into the roast beef, cutting it into tiny, meaningless pieces. My role: to be quiet, not to exist. The wedding at their estate. My father waved his fork like a conductor's baton. 300 guests. The governor might even drop by. My cousin Jennifer practically jumped out of her chair. "Incredible, Sarah! You must be in 7th heaven." "Yes," said Sarah. And then her gaze slid over me, quick, sharp as a blade. Something flashed in it. What? Regret? No. Pleasure. It will be a very exclusive event, only for a certain circle. Aunt Linda snorted. Well, of course. We can't drag just anyone into the senator's estate. And then my father put down his fork. There was a ringing sound, like the sound of an execution bell. Everyone fell silent. "Actually," he said, and his voice took on that steely edge that sent a chill down my spine, "there's a delicate matter." A silence fell over the room, thick, oppressive. 23 pairs of eyes were fixed on him, and he was looking at me. "Emily, this wedding is a matter of the utmost importance. The Thorntons, they're different, sophisticated, well-connected, people who mean something." My stomach sank and fell into an abyss. I understood. Oh God, I understood everything. "What your father means," my mother interjected softly but relentlessly, "is that the impression must be impeccable. Sarah's future depends on it." And frankly, my father leaned back in his chair as if he'd pronounced a death sentence, "you'd be out of place there." The words hung in the air, poisoning him. I felt the heat of shame and rage rise from my neck to my cheeks, burning them. "What?" "You're still huddled in that tiny little cell in Queens," he said with disdainful ease. "You drive a wreck of a car. You work, what do you do? In some hospital." "I'm a doctor," I breathed out. His voice sounded alien. "Yes, yes," he waved his hand, brushing me away like a speck of dust, "but not like a real successful doctor. Not like that Patterson son with his private practice. You just exist. Make ends meet." Sarah shifted in her chair. "Dad." "No, she needs to hear this," he barked. "Emily, your sister is part of the American aristocracy. Do you even understand the scale of that? Senator Thornton dines with presidents. His social circle consists of people on the covers of Forbes." "And you're afraid I'll embarrass you," I whispered. My voice wavered. "Unintentionally," Mom said hastily. "But dear, you have to understand. These people will evaluate every detail, our clothes, our speech, our biographies. They will judge whether Sarah is worthy of joining their family." My father nodded. "Your sister has worked her whole life for this. Wellesley, a job at a prestigious agency. She's sophisticated, successful, flawless. She's the ideal daughter-in-law for the Thorntons. But I wasn't. It hung in the air, heavier than the smell of roast beef. Uncle Tom choked. "Harold, that's cruel." "That's life, Tom," my father snapped. "It's her only chance at a life worth living, and I won't let anyone ruin it, not even my own daughter." He turned to me again. There was no hatred in his eyes, only cold, calculating pragmatism. "You understand, Emily? Nothing personal, simple expediency." I glanced around the table. My mother was studying the pattern on the tablecloth. Sarah stared at her plate as if her new, brilliant life were engraved there. My grandmother pressed her lips together, but remained silent. Everyone else, aunts, uncles, cousins, suddenly found something incredibly interesting in the ceiling, the windows, their fingernails. No one, not a single person, met my gaze. No one interceded. "You don't want me to be at my own sister's wedding." "It's best for everyone," my father concluded. "You'd feel like an outsider. Amid all the glitter, success, and influence, you'd be awkward." "Besides," Sarah finally looked up. There wasn't a drop of warmth in her eyes. "Marcus's family is very strict with their guests. They want to know about everyone. And when they asked about you, I just couldn't think of anything to say. Seriously, Emily, what do you actually do for a living?" Something cracked inside me. Not broken, no. It was that fragile shell that had been building up for years, something real, heavy, and undeniable. "I operate on children's hearts." My father frowned as if he hadn't heard. "What?" "I'm a pediatric cardiac surgeon at Mount Sinai." The voice rang out loud and clear, cutting through the deathly silence. "I stop to open chests and repair hearts no bigger than a walnut. I give parents their babies back. That's what I do." "Oh, don't be dramatic," my mother laughed nervously, waving her hand dismissively. "Well, doctor, yes, that's sweet, but—" My voice stopped shaking. It became cold, like a steel scalpel. "I'm the chief of pediatric cardiac surgery," I said, each word falling on the table like a nail. "I've performed 2,400 successful surgeries. My research has been published in the New England Journal of Medicine. I teach at Columbia University. My annual income is $847,000. The silence in the room became physical. You could choke on it. "That can't be right," my father muttered. And for the first time in my life, his eyes flashed not with confidence, but with panic. Panic from losing control. Why would I lie? "You never mentioned it," Sarah cried, her voice rising to a shriek. "You always gave me generalities. No one knew you were a big shot." "You never really asked," I shrugged, the movement calm and final. "You asked, 'How was work?' I answered, 'At the hospital.' That's the truth. Everything else is your own imagination." My father flushed like an overripe fruit. "If you're so successful, why do you live like a mouse in a hole? Why do you ride around on that bucket?" "Because I don't care about the veneer that's so important to you," I replied. "I live in Queens because the hospital is 7 minutes away. My car starts and takes me wherever I need to go. My money goes to children's charities, research, student loans, to things that matter." "I don't believe you," he hissed, but there was already a crack in his voice. I silently pulled out my phone. I opened the hospital app, where my photo and title glittered. I swiped my finger across the screen and pushed the smartphone across the polished countertop like a poker chip. Doctora Emily Chin, Chief of Pediatric Cardiac Surgery, Lead Surgeon. He stared at the screen as if he were seeing a ghost. Mom craned her neck, her eyes widening. Sarah snatched the phone from his numb fingers. Her face, usually so flawless, had turned gray and sallow. "It doesn't change anything," my father tossed the phone back as if it had burned his fingers. "Even if it's true, you've been leading us on for years, letting us think you were a failure. What kind of person are you?" A man who wanted to understand whether she was loved in this family simply for who she was. The words rang out quietly, but with such clarity that the phrase seemed etched in the air. No titles, no senator's approval. "This is a vile psychological trick," Sarah breathed, her beauty distorted with malice. "No." I slowly rose from my chair, and my shadow finally grew large, filling the corner of the room. "It's vile, refusing your sister an invitation to a wedding because her life priorities don't fit into your new, glossy biography." I glanced around the table one last time. 23 pairs of eyes. Shock, confusion, anger, curiosity, but not a single glance, not a single one, held remorse, not a spark of regret. "I wish you a happy wedding," I said, the words sounding like a formality spoken to strangers. "I hope it lives up to all your expectations." I left that house at precisely 4:23 p.m. I climbed into my old Honda, smelling of hand sanitizer and old leather, and drove off into my real life. I didn't burst into tears. I didn't slam the steering wheel. There was only a huge, all-consuming emptiness inside me. Quiet, like after a storm. My phone started buzzing in my purse almost immediately. Sarah, Mom, Dad. I hung up call after call. At 11:47 p.m., a text came from Sarah. "You're acting like a pouting child. Let's talk like adults." I blocked the number. In the morning, there was a rustling sound under the door. Mom. "Emily, please open up." Her voice was strangled. "He didn't mean to hurt you." That's not what he meant. "What did he mean?" I asked, without opening the door. Silence. Long. Eloquent. "I thought so," I said through the door. The footsteps faded. For the next 3 months, they tried to wear me down. My father sent a long, carefully crafted email about the highest interests of the family and preserving reputation. My mother bombarded my voicemail with messages full of accusations of a broken heart. Sarah sent an essay about how I was ruining her happiest day with my own hands. I deleted everything without reading it. Work became my refuge, my temple. There is an incredible, crystal-clear clarity in holding a child's beating heart in your hands. All these petty family dramas crumble to dust before the simple question, to live or not to live. Every successful surgery, every child I escorted to their parents' room, reminded me of true values, of the quiet joy that doesn't require public applause. My colleagues, of course, sensed something was wrong. Dr. Patricia Williams, my mentor, a woman with a face lined with wisdom and fatigue, once cornered me in the staff room. "You're burning yourself out," she declared, cutting off my escape. "You're not made of iron." "I'm coping." "Emily," she sat down across from me, her gaze piercing. "I've known you for 12 years. That's not coping. That's self-destruction." And I told her everything, from beginning to end. She listened without uttering a word, her expression unchanging. Only toward the end did her gaze become as heavy as lead. "I'm sorry," she finally said. "It's monstrous and unforgivable." "It is what it is." "No," she shook her head sharply. "No, they don't deserve you, Emily. You're one of the best surgeons I've ever seen. You save lives while they play social games. You're brilliant. Your soul is in your work. If they don't see that, they're blind. They see what they want to see. Then make them see the truth." She paused, measuring the next blow. "Your sister's wedding. Soon, right?" "I'm not going." "I'm not suggesting we go." The familiar wrinkles danced in the corners of her eyes. Not a smile, but something cunning, strategic. "But the New York medical world, baby, is as small as an operating room. Rumors fly fast." If only the right words had accidentally reached the right people's ears. I shook my head. "I don't want to cause a public scandal." "It's not about scandal," she corrected me. "It's about the truth. You've buried your light for too long. It's time to let it burn so brightly it blinds." I didn't answer, but her words, like seeds, fell into the black soil of my soul and lay there, waiting. The wedding was scheduled for Saturday, June 8th, the Thornton estate in Greenwich. I knew the date and time down to the minute. I'd received 17 reminder letters before I blacklisted my mother's address. That day, I took a double shift. 2 complex surgeries back to back. A 4-year-old boy with a hole in his heart and a 7-year-old girl with tetralogy of Fallot. My hands didn't shake. My mind was clear and focused. Both children were stable. Both would live. I crawled home at 8:30 in the evening. Empty, but strangely peaceful. I pulled on an old stretched-out sweater, ordered noodles, and buried myself in a documentary about deep-sea fish. At 9:15 p.m., the phone on the table shuddered and whined. An unknown number. I reached to turn it off, but something, the same instinct I'd ignored at the dinner table, made me pick it up. "Dr. Chin," a woman's voice, low, controlled, without a hint of panic, but its very clarity radiated a steely intensity. "Yes, it's me. My name is Catherine Thornton. I'm the wife of Senator Richard Thornton and Marcus's mother." A chill ran down my spine. "Mrs. Thornton, how did you get my number?" "They gave me your hospital number. Sorry for the late call, but my life is at stake. Dr. Chin, I need your help urgently." "Is someone hurt?" I asked automatically, already mentally running through the emergency transport options. "My grandson, my eldest, Jonathan's son, Charlie. He's 3 years old. He collapsed at the rehearsal dinner today. We're at Greenwich Hospital. He's stabilized, but the local doctors, they say he needs urgent heart surgery, a complex congenital defect. They overlooked it." My brain flipped like a switch. Everything personal, everything wounded, retreated, shrank into a dark corner. Only pure, honed logic came to the fore. "What diagnosis exactly?" I asked, already mentally running through the options. "Transposition of the great arteries, complicated by a ventricular septal defect." Catherine Thornton's voice was tense but clear. She was clearly reading from a sheet of paper. "And complications in the coronary artery structure. Abnormal structure." My internal computer instantly spit out statistics, protocols, risks. TMA with VSD. Complicated. Coronary anomaly. That's extreme. A perfect storm in a tiny chest cavity. Dr. Chin, the local cardiologist, said he needs the best pediatric cardiac surgeon in the region. When I called Mount Sinai and asked who they had best for cases like this, they told me you were the one. "Where is he now?" I asked, already kicking off my socks. "At Greenwich Hospital, but we can get him to Mount Sinai in an hour if you agree to operate. Please, he's my grandson. He's 3 years old. The local doctors, they're not ready for this. They're afraid." 3 years. TMA. Coronary anomalies. Every second counts. The internal dialogue, all the pain, all the resentment, evaporated. All that remained was cold calculation and the knowledge that I'd done this 127 times. And all 127 times, successfully. "Meet me at Mount Sinai," I said, already pulling my jeans on with one hand. "Arrange an emergency transport. Have them call ahead and summon my team. I'll be there in 40 minutes. "Thank you." Her voice wavered momentarily, betraying all the panic that had built up overnight. "Thank you." I threw the phone down on the couch and instantly dialed the operating room. The voice was firm, barking orders. "Command for emergency arterial transfer. Infant, 3 years old. TMA with VSD. Complex coronaries. Meet me in an hour. Everyone be at your stations." Then, keys in hand, door wide open, and I raced into the night, into my old Honda, which now sped through the empty streets toward the hospital like an ambulance. Charlie Thornton arrived at 10:38 p.m. I was already standing in the pre-op room wearing a green scrub suit, studying his images on the light screen. The picture was even worse than I imagined. The coronary arteries, those vital threads that feed the heart, were in the wrong place and so insidiously positioned that any manipulation of them threatened disaster. But it was doable. Mortally difficult, but within my capabilities. In the hallway, Catherine Thornton intercepted me. The elegance of her evening gown stood in stark contrast to the hospital walls. Expensive eyeshadow smudged under her eyes. "Dr. Chin, I don't know how to thank you." She paused, searching my face. A face devoid of makeup, tired, but focused. "Excuse me, you look familiar. Have we met?" I doubt it, I said briefly, not looking away from the folder of test results. She shook her head, pushing the thought away. Never mind. Please tell me about my boy. The whole truth. I explained the situation to her, the risks, the prognosis, in cold, clear medical language. She listened, absorbing every word, asking precise, penetrating questions. This wasn't just a frightened grandmother. This was a strategist, accustomed to managing crises. How long will it take? 4 to 6 hours. It's precision work. But you can handle it. There was no doubt in her voice. There was a commanding faith. I've performed this operation 127 times. I have a 100% survival rate. I wasn't bragging. I was stating a fact. Her only stronghold in this nightmare. She squeezed my hand, the hand that would soon be holding a scalpel. I trust you completely. The operation began at 11:42 p.m. My team, Ranjit, Amanda, and the old nurse Margaret, was a well-oiled machine, every cog in the machine knowing its job. Silence reigned beneath the vaulted ceiling of the operating room, broken only by the monotonous beeping of monitors and sparse commands. The air was sterile and tense. The major arteries were rearranged, every millimeter, every suture, under the microscope. Then came the treacherous coronary arteries. They had to be disconnected and repositioned with such precision as not to disrupt the blood supply. One wrong stitch, and the heart muscle would starve to death. My fingers worked automatically, guided by years of practice. I thought of nothing but anatomy, nothing but this tiny, crippled heart beating beneath my hands. At 4:17, the last stitch was in. "Closing," I said, and only then did I allow myself to take a deep, trembling breath. By 5:30, Charlie, stable and hooked up to machines, was sent to the pediatric intensive care unit. I found them in the waiting room. Catherine, Senator Richard Thornton, the man from the screens, now just a gray, broken grandfather, and their son Jonathan, the boy's father. All three seemed drained, empty. "He'll be fine," I blurted out first, lifting the burden of unbearable uncertainty from them. Catherine made a sound somewhere between a sob and a laugh and clutched her chest. Jonathan covered his face with his hands, his shoulders shaking. The senator, that monument to power, staggered, and I saw a single, quick, furtive tear roll down his cheek. "The surgery went perfectly," I continued. "His heart is working as it should. If there are no post-operative complications, and we will do everything to prevent them, he will make a full recovery." "Can we go to him?" Catherine breathed. "As long as you like. He's still sedated, but you can sit with him. A nurse will show you." "Dr. Chin," the senator's voice was hoarse, lacking its usual media-friendly softness, "you saved my grandson's life. There are no words to express." "No need to thank me, Senator. That's my job." "No," he shook his head sharply. "It's more than a job. You arrived late at night, on your day off, and stood at a desk for 6 hours, saving a child you'd never seen. It's a calling, a gift." I allowed myself a small, tired smile. I just love what I do. And then Catherine took my hands again, not for support this time, but with a look lit up by determination. "You must come to the wedding today. Please, I insist." I froze. The wedding. That very day. That very hour. "My son Marcus is getting married today in our home," she said, her voice ringing. "It's the least we can do. We will be honored to have you there. You are part of our family now." "I don't think it's appropriate," I began, but the senator himself interrupted. "Please, doctor." "It will mean a lot to us," he said, and his eyes held not a plea, but a firm, unshakable conviction. And something in me, something tired of being driven out, of hiding, wavered and capitulated. Not out of politeness, out of a strange, new curiosity, out of a desire to see. "What time?" I asked, surprised at my own voice. "The ceremony is at 4, but we had a rehearsal brunch planned for noon. We're rescheduling it because of Charlie. It's at 10. You're invited to everything." "I'll try," I said, and it wasn't polite anymore, but a promise to myself. I drove home in the first rays of dawn. The shower washed away the smell of hand sanitizer and adrenaline. I put on the only decent dress I had, a dark blue formal one, bought some time ago for a scientific conference. Not exactly Thornton Manor, but decent. I tied my hair back and applied eyeliner. Not for them, but for myself, to hide the shadows of a sleepless night. And I climbed back into my old Honda, which was now taking me not to the hospital, but to the front lines of another battle. The estate revealed itself to me in all its overwhelming power. Immaculate lawns, a gigantic white mansion, a tent like a lace palace, the bustle of final preparations, a liveried valet who took my car keys with impeccable politeness, without a hint of judgment in his eyes. I walked onto the terrace for brunch at 5 to 11, and I saw them. My mother was the first to notice me. Her fork, holding a piece of fruit, paused halfway to her mouth. Her eyes widened. My father, sitting next to me, turned his head and froze, like a stone statue, all life extinguished. And Sarah, sitting next to her Marcus in her immaculate morning attire, turned so pale she seemed waxen. She looked as if she had seen not me, but her worst nightmare, realized in the light of day. "Emily?" Mom whispered, and the name sounded like an admission of guilt. But before anyone could jump up or utter another word, a firm, confident hand touched my arm. Catherine Thornton, leading the senator, led me to the center of the terrace. She raised her hand, and silence fell instantly, obeying an unspoken command. "Dear guests," her voice, clear and ringing, echoed through the vaulted ceiling. "I would like to introduce you to this night's heroine, Dr. Emily Chin, the surgeon who just saved the life of our beloved grandson, Charlie." A silence fell on the terrace, and then it was broken by applause, sincere, loud. I stood there, feeling the heat rushing to my face, but not from shame, from something else. Dr. Chin performed a complex 6-hour surgery in the dead of night, Catherine continued, her voice trembling with emotion. Thanks to her, our boy will live and run like all children. Senator Thornton stepped forward, raising his glass of orange juice. His gaze, heavy and meaningful, swept over everyone present, lingering briefly on my parents and sister. "To Dr. Emily Chin," he proclaimed, his deep voice filling the room, "to one of the finest surgeons in our country, and to a true, genuine man." "To Dr. Chin," came a chorus of 50 voices. My father seemed to flush. Not a trace of his pallor remained. A crimson flush suffused his cheeks, neck, even his forehead. My mother stood there, unable to move, seeming to breathe with difficulty, as if she were being constricted by a corset beneath her dress. Sarah gripped Marcus's hand so tightly that her fingers turned waxy white, digging into his palm as if clutching at an elusive straw. "Sit with us, dear," said Catherine Thornton, and her hand on my back wasn't a request, but a gentle but unquestionable command. She led me to the head table, right where 2 empty seats flanked my parents' chairs. I sat down. The chair was heavy and carved. My father looked at me, his lips moving silently, like a fish on the beach. "Emily," he finally managed a hoarse whisper, what are you doing here?" "Mrs. Thornton invited me," I replied, my voice sounding surprisingly calm in my own ears. "But where from? How do you meet the Thorntons?" "As I've told everyone, Harold," Catherine interjected, her voice ringing like a crystal bell, drowning out my father's whisper, "Dr. Chin saved my grandson's life last night. Emergency heart surgery. Dr. Chin is the chief of pediatric cardiac surgery at Mount Sinai Hospital. Our savior." Mom made a strange, choking sound, as if she were suddenly being strangled. Marcus turned to Sarah slowly, as if in slow motion. His expression expressed not just surprise, but complete bewilderment, bordering on disbelief. "Your sister, is she the Dr. Chin, the one my father was talking about?" Sarah nodded, barely perceptibly. It seemed she was afraid to move her head lest it shatter into pieces. "Sarah, dear," Marcus's voice broke, tinged with resentment, "why didn't you ever tell me your own sister is a leading cardiac surgeon? My father tried to get a consultation with her for 6 months. She consults for the Senate committee. Her methods, they're game changers." "I didn't know," Sarah breathed. The words hung in the air, so pathetic and absurd that even some of the guests at the next table exchanged glances. "I'm not a leading surgeon," I corrected gently but firmly. "I'm just doing my job." "Simple?" Senator Thornton laughed loudly, slapping his knee. "Dr. Chin, you're too modest. I read your research on minimally invasive correction of tetralogy of Fallot in newborns. It's Nobel-level work. In medical circles, you're called a miracle worker." My father looked at me, not at his daughter Emily, but at some stranger, an alien in a familiar guise. The horror of realization was in his eyes. "I tried to tell you at that dinner. You wouldn't listen." "You said you were a surgeon," he muttered, his voice hollow. "You didn't say you were like that." "You didn't ask a single question," I reminded him, and it sounded like a death sentence. At that moment, Jonathan Thornton, Charlie's father, approached the table. He had a phone in his hand. "Dr. Chin, I was just texting my wife. She sent you a huge thank you and wants to hug you in person as soon as she's better. She never left Charlie's side." "That's unnecessary," I said sincerely. "The important thing is that he's okay." "He's alive because you were there," Jonathan's voice wavered, and he brushed the sudden moisture from his eyes with the back of his hand. "My son will live, grow, and run because one amazing woman dropped everything and went to the hospital on Saturday night." And before I could pull away, he hugged me, tightly, like a man, with that rough tenderness that held more gratitude than 1,000 words. Behind him, my family stood frozen, as if on a stage. My mother was crying silently, tears streaming down her cheeks, washing away her carefully applied makeup. My father looked as if he'd just been punched in the gut and forgotten how to breathe. Sarah whispered something feverishly and quickly into Marcus's ear, her face contorted with panic. Brunch continued. I tried to swallow a piece of eclair, but people kept coming up to me. Strangers, important, sophisticated people. They shook my hand, looked into my eyes with genuine admiration, told stories about nephews with heart defects, about friends who had undergone surgeries. Catherine introduced me to everyone as a treasure, and each time the story about Charlie grew with new, almost mythical details. She worked magic for 6 hours straight, I heard. My family was silent. They sat in their corner, cut off by the noise of the general celebration, and simply watched. Watched as the very world they so desperately wanted to fit into welcomed me with open arms. Watched as a senator called me colleague. Watched as the governor's wife asked for advice. My father tried to break through the flood of people to reach me. "Emily, we need to talk. Now." "Not now," I snapped, not even looking at him. "Not here." He retreated as if recoiling from a hot iron. The 4 o'clock ceremony was a flawless spectacle. Sarah, in a dress worth the price of my annual rent, floated like a ghostly bride. Marcus gazed at her adoringly. I sat in the 5th row, between a judge in a wig and the ambassador's wife. I could feel their gazes, my father's, my mother's, like 2 icy lasers piercing the back of my neck. At the banquet, Catherine was adamant. "You are at our table. You saved part of our family. Now you are part of it." So I found myself at the head table, next to the senator himself. My parents, aunts, uncles, and cousins were huddled somewhere in the distance, at table 7, next to Marcus's distant relatives and hedge fund colleagues. During dinner, the senator leaned toward me, lowering his voice. "I confess, Dr. Chin, your appearance seems to have come as a surprise to your family." "We have a complicated relationship," I said cautiously. He nodded. His penetrating gaze slid toward their table and back to me. "Well, their oversight is our blessing. I wasn't kidding about the consultation. Your expert opinion on the pediatric cardiac care bill would be invaluable." "I'd be happy to help, Senator." "Richard," he corrected with a slight smile. "For my grandson's savior, only Richard." Around 8:30, when the dancing was in full swing and the air was trembling with bass, my mother finally managed to corner me at the dessert table, mesmerized by a multi-tiered cake. "Emily, please, we have to talk." Her voice was hoarse from tears and champagne. "About what, Mom?" I asked, looking not at her, but at the sugar roses. "About everything. About that horrible dinner. Oh," she waved her hand helplessly, taking in the entire ballroom, this entire unthinkable reality. "About all of it." "What exactly do you want to hear from me?" "I want you to forgive us," she sobbed, her face contorted into a grimace of genuine pain. "We were terribly mistaken. We didn't know." "You didn't want to know." My words fell like icy shards. "At that table, I told you who I was. Dad said I was lying. You laughed in my face." "We didn't understand." "You weren't interested in understanding. I wasn't fit for Sarah's wedding because my life didn't fit your picture, because I have an old car and an apartment in Queens. You judged by the cover, Mom, and you deemed a book unworthy of your library." "We're so sorry," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Are you sorry for what you did, or sorry you miscalculated?" She froze, unable to answer, and in that silent pause lay the answer. "I thought so," I said quietly. And then, as if on cue, Father appeared. His face was gray and drawn, but a strange, feverish light burned in his eyes. "Emily, Mother is right. We made a terrible mistake. But you must understand our fear, our concern for Sarah's future." "I don't owe you anything," I interrupted, and for the first time, steel crept into my voice. "You called me a burden. You said I would disgrace you all. You cut me from your sister's wedding guest list because your vanity was more important than blood." "We didn't know what you'd achieved," he cried, his voice laced with desperation. "Would it have mattered?" I asked, every word honed like a blade. "If I were just an ordinary doctor at a municipal clinic with an ordinary salary and an ordinary life, would that make me less than human? Would that justify my exile?" He froze, his mouth hanging open. But no words came, only emptiness. "You taught me a lesson that love in this family is a transaction," I continued, my voice now even, almost emotionless. "That my worth is measured in carats, dollars, and connections. That I must earn the right to belong." I took a deep breath. It smelled of expensive perfume, flowers, and hypocrisy. "Well, lesson learned. Excellent." "Emily, for heaven's sake." "I have to go," I said, pulling away from them, from their outstretched hands, from their wet, pleading eyes. "I have a patient. He needs to be checked out." I turned and walked away. I got in the car and didn't go home. I went to where everything made sense, to Mount Sinai. The road was dark and deserted, and only the dashboard lights illuminated my hands on the steering wheel. Hands that had just held a crystal goblet, and a few hours earlier, a human heart. Charlie lay in the intensive care unit, surrounded by the quiet hum of machines. He was conscious to my relief. His large eyes, clouded by sedatives, found me in the doorway. He looked as fragile as a bird, but a green tooth beat steadily and stubbornly on the monitor. "How are you, soldier?" I asked, approaching and automatically checking the drains and IV. He slowly, with great effort, raised his hand and gave a weak but unmistakable thumbs up. This simple gesture, this childish symbol of "everything's okay," pierced me more sharply than any words of gratitude in the ballroom. "You're a tough cookie," I whispered, adjusting the edge of his blanket. "The bravest. Everything will be okay." His mother, Amanda, was dozing in a chair by the bed and woke with a start. Seeing me, she stood up and took my hand. Her palms were cold, but her grip was firm. "Thank you, Dr. Chin. You brought him back. Just brought him back." "Please," I said, and that was all that needed to be said. That was the whole point. The whole vicious cycle of social events, gossip, judgment, and pretense was crumbling here, in this quiet room under the green light of the monitors. Here, I knew for sure, I had made a difference, a real, tangible, undeniable one. I had returned a son to his mother. I had given the boy tomorrow. My work left a scar on the world, not an ugly one, but a life-affirming one, a scar beneath which beat a mended heart. My family would never have understood this. They measured the universe in carats, square feet, and names in an address book. They looked for reflections of their greatness in the eyes of others and failed to see the light that shone from within. My light was too simple for them. It didn't sparkle, but warmed. It didn't blind, but gave life. I didn't wear my success like a shiny cloak. I wore it like an old, comfortable gown I'd worn to the operating room. For me, that was enough. More than enough. The next week, my phone went crazy. 47 missed calls from my father, 53 from my mother, 31 from Sarah, another barrage from aunts, uncles, and cousins, more than 60 calls merging into one continuous hum of reproach and pleading. I didn't pick up. They bombarded me with letters, text messages, even paper envelopes delivered by courier to my door. All variations of the same old tune. Sorry, mistake, come back. Some voices sounded sincere. A letter from my grandmother, written with a trembling hand, was laced with pain and shame. An email from Uncle Tom admitted, we were blind and cruel. But most of the messages were prompted by a new, sudden discovery of my usefulness. Cousin Jennifer wanted me to look at her daughter's MRI scans. Aunt Linda wanted to know if I had access to experimental drugs for my husband. My father, in his message, waxed poetic about how proud he was of my achievements and how wonderful it would be to strengthen the family now that we had such a trump card. Even Sarah wrote that Marcus's family was so interested in meeting me, and I couldn't possibly grace them with my presence at a couple of important dinners. They still didn't understand. They didn't understand anything. 3 weeks later, Catherine Thornton invited me to lunch, just the two of us in her bright, sunny living room. I must apologize, she said, putting down her fork, for that awkward moment at the wedding. I didn't know about the background. You have nothing to apologize for, I replied. You invited your grandson's savior. It's all fair and square. Whatever, she shook her head, her intelligent eyes shining with understanding. You were on edge, and their faces, shock, horror, panic, they truly didn't know about who you really are. They knew I was a doctor. They just assumed I was a failure, based on appearances. But why, she asked softly, why did you allow them to remain in this ignorance? I took a sip of water, gathering my thoughts. Because I wanted to test it, even some foolish, childish hope that they could love just me, Emily, without a title, without numbers on my tax return, without the approval of the senators. A bitter smile touched my lips. The experiment failed. Brilliantly. Catherine reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. Her touch was warm and firm. Their loss, my dear, honestly. We sat for over 2 hours. We talked not only about medicine and politics, but also about betrayal, loneliness, the weight of other people's expectations. Catherine turned out to be that rare person who listens not to respond, but to hear. As I left, I felt like I had found not a patron, but a friend, a true one. This friendship blossomed in the following months. She introduced me to her circle, not as a curiosity, but as an equal. I met people whose eyes lit up with interest when I talked about my work, not my connections. People who valued my intelligence, not my potential usefulness. The senator, Richard, as he now insisted, truly brought me into the legislative work. We spent hours discussing the finer points of pediatric cardiology funding, and I saw how my words, my expertise, changed the lines of documents that could save thousands of Charlies. Charlie himself was visibly gaining weight. Every checkup was a celebration. He grew fatter, turned pink, and began to act out. His parents sent me photos, him on a swing, making a sandcastle, sleeping with a stuffed bunny. The life he had been given was their most sincere gratitude. My birth family didn't give up. 6 months later, my mother came to the hospital. The guard, confused, called me. Dr. Chin, there's a woman here, Patricia Chin. She says she's your mother. She's insistent. Tell her I'm in surgery. She's asking when you'll be free. I won't, I replied, and hung up. On Christmas Day, a giant basket appeared at my apartment door. Gilded, decorated with bows, brimming with delicacies, premium liquor, and handmade chocolates. A card signed by all 23 family members. We miss you. Home is always waiting for you. I took the basket to a homeless shelter in Queens. Let it be of real use to someone. In February, on my birthday, I was having dinner with friends, Patricia Williams, a couple of fellow surgeons, and new acquaintances from Catherine's world. They threw me a small, warm celebration. And then, amidst laughter and conversation, a waitress approached our table, confused. "Emily, there's a whole crowd of people. They say it's your family." And they walked in. Everyone. That entire chorus of 23 voices. They filled the aisle, disconcerting the other guests. "Surprise!" Mom sang, her voice trembling with nervous delight. "We've decided to throw you a real family celebration." My friends froze. I slowly stood up, placed the bills for my dinner on the table, and said calmly, "We're leaving." "Emily, wait, come on." My father took a step forward, his hand reaching out to me. "No," my word cut off the air. "I'm here with my family. Please, leave us." "But we're your family," Sarah cried out. There wasn't malice in her voice, but a kind of childish resentment, almost bewilderment. For the first time in a long time, I looked at her closely. She was thinner, more haggard. The expensive dress hung on her like it was on a hanger. A gray weariness showed through her perfect foundation. She looked unhappy. Truly unhappy, despite the estate, the family name, and the 3-carat diamond. "You are my biological family," I said, every word heavy and final. But family isn't about genes. Family doesn't humiliate. It doesn't banish out of shame. It doesn't judge each other by price tags and connections. "We realized our mistake," my father's voice broke. "We're sorry." "You're sorry for your mistake," I corrected him. "For your miscalculation. You're not sorry for the pain you caused. You're sorry that I wasn't the loser you decided to believe I was. If I really had been, you'd still think you were right to disown me." A deathly silence fell over the restaurant. Everyone froze, holding their breath. "Please," my mother fell to her knees on the carpet, her voice a hysterical whisper. "We're family. We can fix this." "No," I said quietly, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "You can't. Because to fix it, you'd have to break yourself and build yourself anew, change your very value system. And I don't believe you're capable of that. You don't want me. You want the version of me that now suits your status." I walked out, and my friends, without a word, stood up and followed me. My blood relatives didn't follow. They remained standing there in the middle of the restaurant, an island of shame and disgrace. A year later, almost to the day after that wedding, a letter from Sarah lay in my mailbox. The envelope was plain, ungilded, thin as a blade. It was unlike anything that had come before. No pleas, no excuses, no requests for a coffee date, just the naked, inside-out truth. She wrote about how her entire life had been a long, grueling spectacle for our parents. How she chose college, jobs, dresses, smiles, and ultimately a husband, guided by one question: will they approve? How she chased the mirage of their love, which was always conditioned by her conformity to their mold. She wrote that my appearance at her wedding, in the aura of a true success unimaginable to them, shattered her crystal cage. While she was collecting approval, I was saving lives. While she was building a facade, I was constructing meaning. She wrote that she was now seeing a therapist, that she was trying, painfully and creakingly, to peel away the toxic attitudes she'd absorbed with her mother's milk, that her marriage to Marcus had cracked when the goal of impressing disappeared, and now they were trying to find real people in each other, not social assets. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She wrote directly, "I don't deserve him. Not now. Maybe never." She simply wanted me to know that she, who she was truly, sickeningly, bone-achingly ashamed. I reread the letter until the words swam before my eyes. Then I picked up the keyboard. Not to forgive, it was too early, but to say, I got it. I see you." It wasn't the seed of reconciliation, but a thin, fragile bridge across an abyss. That's how our correspondence began. At first, monosyllabic dispatches about books read and the New York slush. Then, a little bolder, a little deeper. She shared the heavy burden of parental expectations, which she now bore alone. I talked about my daily life, about the drama beyond the operating room walls, about the people who had become closer to me than blood. We moved slowly, carefully, as if on thin, fragile ice after a long winter. But there was still support underfoot. There was a beginning. With my parents, I established a clear, impenetrable boundary. Holiday cards went unopened in the trash. When they showed up at medical conferences after learning about my presentation, I flagged down security. They tried to infiltrate through colleagues, through mutual acquaintances, clinging to any crack. I remained an unshakable rock, silent and steadfast. 2 years passed. 2 years after that Sunday hell at the dinner table. And at 37, I received the Lifetime Achievement Award from the American Association for Pediatric Cardiac Surgery, the youngest recipient ever. The ceremony at the Waldorf Astoria was a sea of tuxedos and evening gowns. 800 of the finest medical minds from around the world. Seated in the front row were Catherine and Richard Thornton. And then, to applause, 5-year-old Charlie ascended the stage, healthy, rosy-cheeked, and bearing a heavy crystal award with a serious expression. His parents, Amanda and Jonathan, stood beside him, beaming like suns. My acceptance speech was brief. I spoke of the trust bestowed upon us surgeons, along with the life of a child, of the quiet sanctity of the operating room, of how true mastery is measured not only by suture technique, but also by the ability to hear the fear in a mother's voice. I thanked my mentors, my invaluable team, and my small, fearless patients. I didn't mention my family. There was no need. But I knew they were there, somewhere in the back rows, in the shadows, watching. After the ceremony, amid congratulations and flashing cameras, my father made his way to me. He seemed smaller, as if the air had been slowly escaping him over the past 2 years. "Emily," his voice was quiet, almost obsequious. "Excellent speech. Thank you. I'm proud of you." I turned to him, taking a moment to consider the new wrinkles around his eyes, the gray hair at his temples. "Are you proud of my accomplishments? Or are you proud of me? Just me?" He froze. The pause stretched, growing sticky and awkward. His entire answer lay in that hesitation. "I thought so," I said calmly. "Emily, I'm trying. I really am trying." "I know you're trying," I nodded, "and I appreciate it. But trying doesn't mean understanding. You like Dr. Chin, the laureate, the star of surgery, the socialite, but you still feel bad for the Emily who drives an old Honda and lives in Queens simply because it's convenient for her. You love the situation, not the person." "I love you," he breathed, tears glistening in his eyes. "Perhaps," I agreed, "but the love you can give is no longer enough for me. It never was." I turned and walked into the crowd, leaving him alone with the crystal shard of his pride that had never become love. Sarah caught up with me at the elevators. We had met several times before, on neutral ground, over coffee in a bustling Brooklyn coffee shop. Our relationship was still like fragile glass, but it was whole. "You were magnificent," she said, hugging me quickly, matter-of-factly, but there was genuine warmth in the embrace. Absolutely deserved. "Thank you for coming." "I told Marcus I'd sit separately from them," she admitted. "I needed to be here for you, not to maintain a facade." Those words were worth more than any award. It means a lot to me. "I'm glad," she smiled, a little tired, but her own. "Really." We walked down together, chatting about her new job at a small nonprofit. She spoke with a sparkle I hadn't heard in her voice in years. Outside, under the lights of Park Avenue, my new, real family was waiting for me. Catherine, Richard, and the irrepressible Charlie. "Dr. Chin," he shouted, rushing toward me and wrapping his arms around my legs. "There was strawberry cake." "Hello, hero," I laughed, scooping him up in my arms. He was warm, alive, a true bundle of the future. "So, do you approve of the cake?" "I approve," he declared seriously. "Can I have more?" We all laughed together, and the laughter was light, unimportant, and priceless all at once. Back in my old, cozy apartment in Queens, I poured myself some tea and sat by the window. The city below glowed with millions of lights, each one a life, a story. My phone vibrated, a message from Dr. Williams. "Brilliant. Proud to have been your teacher. Don't relax. A little heart with a left heart transplant awaits us on Monday. The family is asking for you." Hypoplasia of the left heart, a long, difficult journey that parents undertake only when they completely trust the surgeon. I smiled and replied, "I will. I'm not going anywhere." This is my life now. It's a full cup, not from scandalous attention or ostentatious love, but from a quiet, lasting meaning. It includes colleagues who respect my scalpel, but also know that I cry at silly rom-coms. Friends who can call at 3 a.m. because they simply need to be listened to. The parents of my patients, whose trust is heavier than any reward. Sarah, who slowly, step by step, becomes not a rival, but a sister. Catherine, whose wisdom and unconditional support became the motherhood I always needed. And Charlie, an eternal, living reminder of why I walk through these doors every morning. This is my family, the one I pieced together, the one who chose me without titles or regalia. And as for my parents, they're still trying. Cards, timid calls, invitations to discuss things like adults. I don't hate them. I'm not even angry. I just finally saw them clearly. People locked in their own narrow universe of conventions, and I've accepted that our orbits no longer intersect. Maybe someday something will change, or maybe not. But now I'll be okay either way, because I've finally learned the lesson they tried so hard to teach me, only I got it with a perfect score, while they got a bad one. My worth doesn't depend on their approval. It never has, and it never will. I am Dr. Emily Chin. I restore the beat to tiny hearts. I change the course of children's lives. I give the gift of tomorrow. And that is more than enough.